Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the Research Fellowship application process and expectations. So we'll just start with some housekeeping. If you could please mute yourself and then submit your questions via the chat box. And please note that the meeting is being recorded. So the objectives of the applicant webinar is to help you understand the objectives of and processes for applying to the Research Fellowship call. For you also to learn about the fellowship structure, the expectations and the outputs that are required as part of the fellowship, learn how to become an accredited researcher and how to secure access to the data, and also to answer any questions that you may have to help you decide whether or not you would like to apply. So in terms of topics that we're going to cover, we'll do some introductions. We'll give you a background to ADR UK and the Research Fellowship scheme. We'll talk in depth about the fellowship phases. Then we'll talk about how to apply, what the funding decision criteria are. You'll learn about the ONS Secure Research Service, how you become an accredited researcher and how you will access the data. And then we'll look more closely at the fellowship expectations and outputs. There'll be a summary of what we've discussed in the next steps with some crucial dates, and we'll also give you the email addresses that you may need if you have any further inquiries. Please don't worry about taking notes because we will share all the slides with you. And then we will leave plenty of time at the end for any questions. So I'd like to start with some introductions. So I'm Bogusia Wojciechowska. I'm part of ADR UK, part of the team that commissions the research fellowships. I'd like to now move over to Greg.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Greg Meredith. I'm a senior research manager at ADR UK, and I lead on our research fellowship design and our evaluation as well.
Thank you. And Katrina?
Hello, I'm Katrina Taylor. I'm the Senior Programme Coordinator within ADR UK, but I work very closely with this team in terms of scheduling and processes and trying to work our way through the forest of applications and forms and various organisations.
Great. And then Jenny?
Hi everyone, yeah, I'm Jenny Kerr. I work at the Office for National Statistics. I'm in the data sourcing and curation team, but I work closely with the ADR team on the fellowships.
Great, thank you very much. And Greg, I think you want to launch a poll at this point, which is purely for our own internal information.
Yeah, great, thanks, Bogusia. I think I've got the next few slides, so I'll take over from here. So as I mentioned, we just want to launch a very quick poll for you all now, just to learn a little bit more about why you're here and your intentions for applying to our fellowship course. So I'll just launch that now. You should see that pop up, and in the chat, there are 3 questions. So I'll just give you a few minutes to kind of go through that and select your multiple choice answers. This will help inform our kind of assessment process to get a sense of, we're really keen to get a sense of both the number of applications and the data sets you're interested in today, and also what your expertise is with using administrative data as well. So these won't be shared with everybody as well, so it's just with ourselves for planning purposes. So I'll just give a few minutes to let those responses come in. I found that the polls on Microsoft Teams is a bit hit and miss, so hopefully you all can see that, but do let us know if not. We'll try to get that reposted. Great, just coming up. I'm gonna okay, I think I'll leave that open for now, and I'll kind of close it when I finish my section. So I wanted to kick off this morning just to give you, for those of you that aren't so familiar with ADR UK, a bit of an overview of who we are and what we do and why we exist. And so we're a partnership across the UK, really looking to transform the way researchers access and use administrative data to enable better policy decisions and public and derive public benefit from those data that are just sitting there waiting to be used. Now, we see a huge amount of value in trying to open up access for researchers to administrative data, which wasn't primarily collected for research purposes, and so has that caveat with it. But you know, that the feeling was that data is sitting there, and if we could utilize it, it's a really powerful tool to really provide access to researchers to start to interrogate and answer some pressing policy questions. And so, you know, today we have over 1,000 projects completed, and our list of linked data sets is growing all the time. And so really the key benefit we see is in linking together data held by different areas of government. So looking at those data sets that are sitting in different departments and really trying to bring them together to answer sort of critical questions. So just this slide is just a little bit of an overview of how we work. So a large portion of the funding within the ADR UK partnership goes towards the sort of the teams and the people to kind of link the data sets together and get them ready for sharing with yourselves, with researchers. And that's a major proportion of our funding that's made available. Once those are linked and there's lots of kind of quality assurance and documentation produced, we sort of try to get them into place where we feel they're research ready alongside relevant documentation. And that's where Bagusha and I and the team pick them up once they're available in the SRS. We really want to use our research funding to demonstrate the value of those data sets and really back to, I guess, the departments that have invested a lot of time into and resources into kind of delivering them and making them accessible, but also just to kind of showcase the value of administrative data. This is, you know, for often our data sets are some of the first researchers using them. We tend to launch our fellowship opportunities with our datasets where there's actually been very limited research on them to date. So some of the new datasets, for instance, eChild, there has been some work done, you know, on that, but it's had quite a limited access to that dataset beyond making it available across the UK to accredited researchers. So it's a little bit about how we work with our research findings, and then we put a lot of effort into you'll see throughout the focus of our fellowships and our call on really kind of deriving those policy insights and trying to facilitate the engagements that will kind of help inform future policy decisions. And naturally, we have very close working relationships with departments because of the first stage here. We work really closely with them to kind of develop and link the data so that by the time we come to facilitating the research, we're able to kind of hopefully put fellows in contact with those key teams internally within departments that then want to use the evidence that's been generated. So this is a little bit about our model and how we work. We have partners across the UK in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and a team within England as well. So I'll mention in a little bit our ADR flagship brochure, which is the kind of focus of this fellowship opportunity. So on to the next slide. Thanks, Patricia. So I think just wanted to state here what our ambition is for the fellowships, and I've touched on it briefly, but for some of the data sets in our flagship data brochure, they've been around for a number of years, and there's a kind of growing body of research using them. For others, they're relatively new in terms of being opened up for a wider research audience. So really, we want to make those available as soon as possible. We want to demonstrate the potential of those data sets, use them to their full potential, and really kind of, I guess, stress test them, really kind of show, give feedback to departments on the quality of the linkage, the quality of the data sets, and showcase the potential for impact. And so we're looking across a number of objectives there that I'll go into in my next slide, just to really kind of demonstrate the value and the kind of the years and years of resource that's gone into developing these. So we're looking to derive insights on that feasibility and drive forward the resource for future researchers. And again, as some of these first researchers accessing the data, you're also helping us iterate and make the process easier for future researchers that want to access that. So our access times are coming down all the time, and it's only really through running these fellowship opportunities and getting kind of researchers through the process that we work really closely with our trusted research environments, such as ONS and SAIL, to try to speed up that process, to get from the point of application to access the data to having a project space with the data ready to go for you to use, really trying to shorten that window as much as we can. And again, we really want this to be accessible to as broad an audience as possible. We're looking to grow the community of researchers using administrative data, feel comfortable doing that, have the skills to do it. And we're very conscious that we've funded quite intensively some teams to develop the data sets, and we'd really like to grow the community around those as well. So we really want this to be a level playing field, and encourage you, if you have any questions about eligibility, to come to us. So you'll see in the call announcement that I'll post into the chat soon. We list 4 core objectives for our fellows, and this just kind of elaborates on just a little bit about what I've been saying. So we really want to kind of demonstrate the research potential of the data sets, showcase that, and derive some policy impact. We're conscious that this is a new resource often, and we really want to develop that for future users by sharing code, developing metadata files. Some of our outputs that we sort of require are geared towards this, in terms of the kind of data explained piece as well. I'll go into that a little bit later in the presentation. We're conscious that we really want to maintain and demonstrate trustworthiness throughout the process. It's really important. This is kind of the public's data, and we need to build in public engagement into everything we're doing with our research to maintain that trustworthiness and build it. And as I say, this 4th objective around trying to grow the community of researchers around that. We've put these objectives into our fellowships because some of these you will naturally achieve by just moving through your research phase, developing outputs for the users, sharing your code, for things like that. We're really looking at what else you may want to bring in your impact phase that might help share your experiences with a wider cohort of researchers that help build that community and get more people using the data. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So just a quick summary then of some key features that just to flag up at the top here. This is an 18-month research grant administered through UKRI. So our list of eligible institutions is online. If you have any questions about that, you can find out more, and we can share some links, and feel free to ask those questions in the chat. We will fund 80% of the full economic cost. The remaining 20% is met by those eligible institutions. We're running an expression of interest phase for this funding opportunity. The deadline for that is the 15th of August, and we're really asking for a relatively brief and concise email, which really summarizes your project. I think reflecting on what we've learned for some previous rounds, as these are new data and the documentation could be long, it could be that it needs developing more. There's sometimes some misconceptions about the data sets that creep in. So we really want to help you develop feasible projects. And so this expression of interest is a way that we can do that and provide you with some feedback. If something looks like a little bit out of place, or you're proposing a linkage that isn't feasible or possible, we would hopefully flag that and catch that through this phase. And it also helps us build appropriate panels to assess your projects if we know the types of research applications we're going to get. So strongly recommend you to use that expression of interest stage. It's not mandatory, but we really want to use it to help facilitate more feasible applications and inform our peer review, our review stage as well. So our deadline is the 10th of October at 4 o'clock. Just a flag to say your institutions may have deadlines ahead of that. So just make sure you let your institutions know about this upcoming application, and they may advise that it's a week or 2 before that, depending on where you're hosted. We do welcome applications from researchers with a PhD or equivalent experience. That really is that we would like to see that this is going to be, I guess, an independent research projects. Our panel will be looking for evidence in your CV that you're capable of kind of managing that research project as they would through someone as equivalent experience of someone that's just maybe finished their PhD and looking for their first fellowship through there. So we try to be really flexible with this. We do want to encourage a broad range of applicants here. We do stress that you build in lots of training if you need that at the start of your fellowship. That's what that's for. And so, we do get applications from people that are just finishing their PhD in their final year. I think if you are just doing that and you're early in your career and looking to apply for this at that stage, our panels tend to look at whether you can manage that both projects together, and so it's one thing for you just to consider the kind of time considerations there. A list of eligible datasets is in the flagship data brochure, which I've provided a link on here, and I'll add it in the chat so you can see the key kind of linkages that we've adopted and we're building lots of support around, and we really want to promote in that flagship brochure, and that provides the scope of this call here. You don't have to be a permanent member of staff to apply, so long as you have an agreement to be hosted for the duration of your fellowship at an eligible institution. So that's something you can kind of negotiate with an institution if you're on a temporary contract or you're not actually currently hosted at an institution. And just to say, we do have a funding panel and decisions are made. Those offers will be conditional until we have final data owner approval. Now, this is why we can sometimes get delays in getting our offer letters to you. We often have our offer letters ready to go, but just to say, until you're through your final approvals for your project, that we can't issue our offer letter. So it remains conditional, but 99% of the time it's all fine, and it's just going through the process, but we do have to wait until we have that. So just as a expectation management there. On to the next slide, Patricia. So I just want to break down and talk a little bit about the fellowship phases that you'll have noticed hopefully in the advertisement. So I think what we've learned, we started offering 12-month fellowships, and we really feel that those were not long enough. There was lots of delays, and we really wanted to build in more time for that as much as we could, given our kind of current funding that we have available within ADR UK. So we've kind of lengthened our fellowships to 18 months. Now, we see these as kind of breaking down into two phases, a 15-month research phase, which is your kind of, core research project and research phase, and really just want you to build in some time at the beginning of your fellowship to do your data discovery, tackle any training that you need, get familiar with the data, and there may still be some kind of lingering back and forth on the data that you receive in your space if you have a look at that and you realize you want some additional variables or things. There's sometimes some back and forth there as you go through that process. So that expectation for the start of your fellowship should be built in there. There's some key outputs that we do expect during this phase, and we've got a communications team that will work with you to kind of draft these up and support you in developing them. We do provide a project webpage based on your application and a blog. And we'll also provide some templates for data insights and data explains, and I'll share more about these later on in the presentation to kind of share your experiences with other researchers and using the data. I think that's it. And the other thing to flag just in this one is really, I think when a piece of feedback we get from our panel is that they would often like to see more consideration given to the impact phase. This is a little bit tricky because I think UKRI removed the requirement for a sort of impact statement, but we do have a dedicated impact phase. And this brings me on to the next slide. And I think what we'd like to see is some consideration of your impact goals being worked on within the core research phase. And so it's often hard to just kind of start the engagement at the end of your project if you haven't built it in throughout and you're not having ongoing conversations with some key stakeholders. So just something to think about during this phase. The expectation isn't that it's a huge piece, but actually I think our panels appreciate seeing some consideration of impact activities happening slowly throughout the project, so it kind of builds to more impact at the end of the project. So we do like to dedicate 3 months at the end of the impact phase up to 0.5 FTE for impact. Again, we've suggested some areas and some activities you may want to consider here, but these are just suggestions. We really do want you to think creatively about these types of activities that you'd like to include in this phase. Broadly speaking, we want this phase to maximize the kind of potential of your project and really give you time to finish your write-up, finish your articles and publications, and provide a dedicated time to do that dissemination and knowledge exchange activities. We will have a meeting with you towards the end of your kind of research phase just to sense check the impact plans that you submitted at your application, because often new opportunities arise and plans can change. And we will work flexibly with you on an updated plan for this core phase. So by all means do submit a kind of, a well thought out plan, but know that there is flexibility built in our fellowship to kind of adjust that as you go, as new engagements and opportunities arrive throughout your research fellowship. So some ideas here, but please don't feel constrained by them. And by all means, make use of this phase, as I think often we see the training and development opportunities is for you at the end of your fellowship to think about your next steps as a researcher. We've included time here for working with other researchers, building that community. And often there's things in here, maybe it's feeding creatively, that you often typically wouldn't get funded. If you want to provide some time to run some workshops to think about your next collaborative project, building on your fellowship and the data that you've used, we're really keen to see that. We're really keen to see how you want to collaborate with a wider community. So yeah, just again, we'll return to that at the end of the fellowship. So just to flag that one there. I think that's me, and I'm going to hand over now to Katrina to kind of take you through how to apply and the process there. I'll try to answer some of the questions that are coming in the chat as well.
Okay, thanks, Greg. So the diagram in front of you is a very, very high level view of the application process. As Greg said, one of the benefits of going through the fellowship scheme is that we have worked closely with data owners and the trusted research environments to try and shorten the windows for all of these different approvals. But obviously, there are a lot of legal frameworks, etc., around the sharing of the data, and we need to make sure that we are satisfying all the requirements from, the whole kind of structure around data sharing. So, as Greg said, we really strongly recommend that you send us a short expression of interest, outlining what you want to do and what data sets you want to use, etc. There would be some feedback on that. I think there's been some queries in the chat about that. And we'll be sharing some of that with the TREs, with the data owners, and just ensuring that your intended application fits with the call, it's feasible, methodology is correct, etc. Then we would ask you to submit on the new, I'll come to this in a moment, the new funding service that UKRI have launched. So those of you who've applied for funding before and have used JES, you'd be very sad to hear that JES is finally leaving us and we've moved to a new funding system, which is apparently a lot better for the users on the other side. So fingers crossed for that one. Once we receive the applications in from that, there will be a detailed review, feasibility check with the TREs, with the data owners, and we also have an academic panel convened to look at these. They will score the applications, and then later on there will be an actual funding panel meeting. From that, those applications that score above the threshold will be offered a conditional award. And as Greg said earlier, this is all conditional until we get to the final bit of the approvals. So within the kind of approvals part of this flow, we've got our funding panel approval and also the UKSA accreditation, the RAP panel approval. Most of our data is shared under the Digital Economy Act, and the UKSA gives the final approval on ensuring that the applications meet the requirements within the DEA. So there's a separate application form which is completed through the ONS RAS system, and there's also ethics and self-assessment, all kinds of things wrapped up in that. I'm sure Jan will take us through that in a little while. So once you get approval from RAP, we then confirm the award. So as Greg said, we will have a draft offer letter ready to go, waiting for this final approval. That's sent out. Any further data access agreements are signed. And then also, if depending on the data set that you've requested access to, sometimes you need to specify which variables you need as opposed to just access to the whole database or data set. And that will have to be built for you. That's then put into your project space within the trusted research environment, and your project can start. Then you've got, I think, 15 months, as Greg said, to work on that. And then there's an expected number of outputs and engagement activities during that process, or towards the end of that process. So next slide, please. Yeah, so we've said that the expression of interest stage is optional, but it is strongly recommended. How that should look is a brief email address there, and we need those by the 15th of August. So that's basically just a summary of the research aims, the questions that you want to answer, the objectives of your research, the data you want to use, so data set years and any specific variables that you might need, geographical spread, etc., and an indication of methodological approach. And yeah, it's only to give us an indication just to ensure that your application will be feasible. It will do what you want to, it will answer what you want to ask with the data that you're requesting. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I mentioned the funding service. So this is on the new UKRI funding service called the funding service. You'll need to create an account if you don't already have one. It's a very straightforward process, and you just need to kind of verify email address and set up a password. There will be questions in the how to apply section, and you can always save and come back or work offline, copy and paste. I think it's a lot more kind of reliable than maybe Jez would have been. And then once complete, you use the service, it goes to your research office for review. They check it and then they return it to you if it needs editing. And once they're happy with it, or you're happy with it, it will be submitted to UKRI for assessment. They do that, it's not the applicant. So our assessment process in the back office, so this is where yeah, the funding application is actually received. We have some kind of basic back office checks that need to be completed. And then there will be a funding panel made up of independent expert reviewers who review and score each proposal. Then these are all taken to a panel meeting. I think this one's planned for December. And following the kind of panel discussions, funding offers will be made, but just to note that they will be subject to final data owner and RAP approval. We expect the outcomes to be communicated within 2 weeks of the meeting, so hopefully before the end of the year that you would know what the outcome of that meeting is. And we expect all offer letters to be issued by March 24. So that allows time for the kind of final UKSA accreditation, RAP approval, etc. So that projects then will be ready to start from April 2024. Next slide, please. So in terms of what the panelists are looking for, there's 5 main things that they consider make a good application. So vision, the work that you're proposing has the potential to advance current understanding or generates new knowledge. Approach, so that you've designed your approach so that it's effective and will actually achieve the objectives you're setting out to look at. To make sure that your applicant team have the capability to deliver, so you've got evidence of how you or your team around you have the relevant experience to deliver this work. Resources and cost justification, obviously we're a public sector body, so money is a very important thing for us to make sure that your resources are comprehensive, they're appropriate and they're justified. And obviously ethics, responsible research and innovation. So have you identified and evaluated your relevant ethical or responsible research and innovation considerations and how they'll be managed? Also, the panelists will be getting some feedback from the ONS and SRS feasibility screening and data owner approval panels. They'll also be reviewing the initial applications. So that will all be fed into our funding panel discussions. But just to note that the funding panel is only, I mean, it's important, but it's only about giving money. So if your application is not funded, is not deemed fundable by ADR UK, it's not the end of your research journey. And we would encourage you to continue talking to ONS or whatever TRE we're using to ensure that the the discussions can continue and your research can continue, possibly with some tweaks or whatever. But yeah, this is the funding decision, not the research decision. Next slide, please. Oh, it's Jenny.
Hi, thanks, Katrina. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few of the bits and pieces from the ONS point of view, which is in this instance is the trusted research environment. I will talk briefly about the SRS itself, go on to how you become an accredited researcher. We'll look at project applications briefly and then ways to access the data. Thanks, Vigusha. Next slide, please. So the ONS Secure Research Service, it's a trusted research environment, which has obviously been mentioned several times. We provide access to de-identified, unpublished data for research for public good. And who can do that? Well, you have to be an accredited researcher, and I will go through that process on the next couple of slides. We stick to the principles of the 5 Safes framework, which means that you know, it's a safe environment. We've got security settings, people are trained, outputs are sort of approved and assessed and so on. So we stick to all of those, ensuring that it's a safe place for everybody to be working. Next slide, please. Okay, so becoming an accredited researcher, you must have either an undergraduate degree, including a significant proportion of mathematics or statistics, or be able to demonstrate at least 3 years quantitative research experience. If you've got both of those, you then also need to undertake our training, agree to be included on the public record and sign a declaration. And I've put links, so I'm hoping that the slides go out to people, or if not, then obviously you can just get in touch to get the links. But you submit your application via the online research accreditation service. The little picture on your right hand side is the screen it will take you to. I've never created an account. I don't tick any of those boxes, so but I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and you go through that process. I believe sort of from beginning to when you end up receiving information about signing up to a safe researcher training session, you're looking at sort of 2 to 4 weeks. So it's not a massively long time, but becoming an accredited researcher, you would need to do that before you put in your project application. So these are all things that you can do in advance. So you complete your safe researcher training, and then you complete an online assessment as well, which I'm told don't rush through. I've never done it, but somebody once said to me, well, sometimes silly mistakes are made. So, but I think there is another opportunity to retake and so on. But you'll have to feed back to me on that one because I've never taken it. So next slide, please, Vigusha. So this is the project application itself, which you apply to us through via the RAS. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the bubbles that apply. So the RAP will assess each project. The Research Accreditation Panel will assess each project based on the public benefit, the demonstrable analytical merit, the project being feasible, relevant privacy implications, and the ethical review. So that's what they're looking for. So when you go in and start completing your application, the first section will ask you all about the project title and duration, and other bits and pieces to do with purpose, methodology, and so on. The next section asks you about your project team, and these applications need to be submitted by the lead or the deputy project lead. And just worth noting that if you've got researchers on your team that aren't yet accredited, they can be added at this stage, but they must be accredited prior to starting the project, or they can be added to a later stage. But you know, it's worth noting that that can happen at this stage. There is a data requirements section, so the link in this bit is to the metadata catalogue, our ONS metadata catalogue, where you can find out a little bit more about the data sets that you would be working with. Then there is an ethics section, and we've already mentioned sort of an ethical self-assessment that needs to be completed. So you'd need ethics approval. a public benefits section, which has a little drop-down list of different benefits to the public that you need to provide justification for, and then a publications section, so work must be published. And as I've said at the bottom of the screen, submit your application via the RAS. There's a link there, and you can go to the UKSA website for guidance and examples of putting in your project. Next slide, please. So finally, from my point of view, accessing the data. So I know there's been a couple of questions in the chat. So there are essentially three different options for accessing the data. Yes, there are safe rooms at Titchfield, at the ONS offices in Titchfield and Newport, and also at NISRA, Northern Ireland. So you can apply to access the data there. There is also a network of 23 safe pods. I'll put a little picture on the right-hand side there, mainly academic institutions. So you can have a look, see if there's anything nearby for you, which you would then go on to the link as well and book out your time. But by far the most popular, and I think it's something crazy like 95% of access is through our Assured Organisational Connectivity, so AOC for short. So there's currently 114 organisations with 188 different agreements. So some organisations can have more than one agreement, because that doesn't sort of make sense really. There's different levels of agreement that can be had. And what this means is that there are safe settings set up after agreement. There's a process that you would go through. You have to comply with security standards. You have to receive annual certification. But you can have a safe room, a safe suite. There's various different ways. Once this status is agreed, it can either be a safe room within an institution, it can be a secure suite within an institution. So there's lots of different sort of ways that you need to look at that. But most importantly, probably for the majority of people, would be the home working, which can be approved once you've got an AOC agreement. So definitely worth, you know, we always say when the applications go in for the fellowship, also start looking at your AOC connectivity, because that's going to be the way that you're probably going to be likely to access your data. So you can, there's also an email at the bottom of this screen. Please make sure that you get in touch, because it's not just about for example, the university having AOC status, it's about the departments within that university as well. So it's really important that you can check whether or not your organisation, your department has AOC status. But I would encourage the application to go in fairly quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm aware that we're running a little bit behind schedule, but I mean, we're happy to stay online, and hopefully it works for everybody else. And now we'll go on to the fellowship expectations and outputs.
Great, thank you. I think what I'll do is maybe answer some of the questions in the chat. And so if people do need to leave at 15:15, we'll continue running the webinar, and the recording will be available for the final few slides as well. So I think just to address a couple of questions that have come up, and I said I wanted to answer a couple live. There was a question around clarifying the job share. We've enabled job shares in this fellowship to try to, you know, make it more flexible for applicants. They are fellowships intended for a single researcher currently, but we do accept applications on a job share basis. Now, we advise on a 0.6 FTE. That's advisory. We'd like to kind of meet that ambition, I guess, in terms of the kind of amount of work that we think it is to work with the data sets, and the ambition that we want to achieve. But we would like to see a significant amount of time being put into these fellowships, whether that's as a single fellow or on a job share basis. That can be split between the two job shares. So as I think Cheryl mentioned, in the final phase, it could be that you're it's 0.5 FTE, or in the core phase, it's you're both contributing 0.3 FTE to meet that minimum requirement recommendation. Sorry. There's a question around teams for that. This is still intended to be a single fellowship. It's just that we've enabled job shares, but you can include mentors and research assistants to help out in some key phases, but we would still expect the bulk of the work to be done there by the research fellow, as it's intended as the career development for that fellow. I think there was a question around start dates. I think we've advised on when we anticipate the earliest start date to be. There is some scope within this round to start typically within sort of 3 months of that date. So it may drift forward slightly. We just have advised on when we think the earliest start date will be. So I think we've suggested April for that, and that there is some scope to flexibility beyond that as well. We haven't yet got to start dates for 24, but do check back on our website for that one. Just looking down.
There's a question about submitting applications. Yes, you start the process by submitting your application through the TFS.
Yeah.
Our funding service. Yeah.
I think there was a question around success rates for this, and so our success rates are actually relatively high for UKRI. We have frequently not been able to spend all of the budget that we've had available, so that should be an indicator that we're actually really looking to get more applications this round, and we want strong applications so that we have more fundable projects that we can spend. We've not been able to spend the budget that's been available. I do have a large budget for this round, and we've increased it, hoping that we get an increased number of applications. So really welcoming more applications, but our success rates are very healthy for UKRI as well. Typically, 30%, 50% for some of our calls, because just the numbers of applications have been low. We'll be sharing more about that in our How to Write a Successful Application webinar. Okay, I'm conscious that people may need to drop off if they've booked other calls, but we'll carry on going through, and maybe because you can answer some of the questions in the call as well. I'll come back to them. So I'll very quickly run through there are some key outputs. Great. Alina's mentioned I did want to answer the primary data question. It's not ruled out. I think we have seen that built into previous projects, building in some funding for primary data collection. I think what we found when the panel assesses those projects is it can be quite tricky to build that in a meaningful way, given the budget and the expectations on using the data to its full potential. And so definitely not ruled out, but I think it's a bit of a job to kind of build that in a meaningful way. And I think some of the stakeholders that you would like to get access to can be quite tricky to access as well, particularly in the criminal justice system, for instance. So some things to think about, but yeah, not ruled out there. We'll circulate the slides and the recordings to everyone as well. So just very quickly, there are some outputs and outputs listed in there, and just to kind of let you know what those entail, what those include. We'll work with you to develop a project page. There is a data insight application and a blog post, as well as working with our communications teams. We also provide you a template to produce at least one data explained, which is really a collection of information for you to demonstrate your learning about the data set and to share with other researchers. I'll skip ahead to the next one just to kind of quickly run through these. So this is the data insights document. It's just to collect your learnings, and you'll meet with us to kind of go through this. So I'll really skim through this one, but it's just to give you a flavour for really what's one of the key outputs that we see as part of the fellowships, including your methodology findings, impact, and therefore for data insights. And this is really sharing what the insights are in a policy friendly way from your project. Going on to the next one, and we'll just skip through these because you're just to share our kind of policy briefings, and there's some examples online. You can have a little look there. Data explained is where we like to collect your learnings and experiences using the data sets. So it is a document which will let you list your research questions and the variables you plan to use, and then share any data limitations you encountered and how and why you changed your project, just as recommendations to other researchers. So going on to the next one, there's just a quick overview of these, and there's examples of these online from previous researchers as well. just get back to the slides. I mentioned one of our core objectives around public engagement, but just to restate it, we really do want our fellows to be demonstrating trustworthiness and maximising public benefit and maintaining that trust as well. So really looking for activities. We do facilitate that. We do have a senior public engagement manager within ADR UK that will work with you, but we're looking for you to really embrace that objective in the core fellowship objectives as well. Yeah, and we do, as you say, that we do maintain some representative panels. You may have your own stakeholders and previous groups that you've engaged with as well. So please don't feel limited by the panels that we manage, and definitely we will facilitate engagement with them, our representative panels. But very much bring your own engagements and stakeholders along with you on the research journey as well. Okay, I think this is just a quick overview of the timetable, and we've got some earliest and later start dates there as well. I think, Jenny, there was a question around the IDS as well, which I think we thought would come up. Do you want to share just around our planning for this? And the fellows, I guess, are expecting to start early next year and putting their applications later in the year.
Yeah, sorry, I was actually going to mention just a very brief line on the IDS because I was aware that some people out there would obviously know about it. Yeah, for those that don't know, the IDS is a new platform, that new trusted research environment that we're currently developing. At the moment, it will be running in parallel. Timings wise, we don't have timings, and so it is likely that your project would take place within the SRS and you wouldn't be affected by IDS. But if there is a time at which the IDS feels that your project could work, the IDS feels that your project could work in IDS, obviously you would be given plenty of notice and discussions would be had. They hope to keep the SRS running with your project until your project is completed. So there shouldn't be an issue there. But if it does transition over to the IDS, then you would be your hand would be held through that process and it would be in discussion with you. In terms of the tooling, which I know there was a question on the tooling, they are also carrying out a lot more discussion and research into what tooling will be available. I know there's issues with it being a cloud platform, and I don't understand all of the tooling myself, but there are lots of discussions going on at the moment. So obviously they're really keen that it sort of ticks every boxes for everybody. So that's a wait and see. I know no more than you do at the moment, or anybody else on the call, about whether or not the tooling that you need will be available in IDS. But I do know that they are increasing the availability of different tooling. I don't know if that answers anything or everything. I'm sure there's probably more questions, but for now, that's as much as I've got.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Yeah, I think we should have a much clearer picture later on in the year. We're not inviting applications yet for data access because it's kind of a shifting. So we will advise any successful applicants, or if you would like to carry on your application at that stage, of what that process is going to be going through that. So we'll be inviting RAP applications. We wanted to keep the application as simple as we could. We don't require 2 applications from you at this stage, just our TFS. And I won't go into how simple TFS is on its own at this stage, but I think there's some.
There's a question about 100% FTE. No, it's not. You're not required to be 100%. We recommend that you don't fall below 0.6 FTE.
Yeah, and I think we typically find that by the time you come to start the fellowship, you're sort of finishing off your PhD, and that's a nice transition, and a lot of applicants that we find for that as well. You do always need to be an accredited researcher. You will be accessing the data through a trusted research environment, either SAIL or ONS. And so regardless of which data set, you do need to be an accredited researcher through the ONS to do that as well. I think that's it for our slides, because is that right? There was a recap, but I think we'll keep trying to go through and just answer the questions in the last few minutes to take us to an hour. So I'm just going to keep going down. Please do shout if or feel free to come off mute and ask your question if we're getting quite a lot through the chat, so I'm trying to pick those up. I
think we've gone through all the questions. Oh, I can see Vicky has her hand up.
Hi there. Oh, my camera's facing the ceiling. So I just wondered if you apply and the chosen topic is too close to something that's already been done, would the applicant be advised about that? And in terms, I'm just thinking, because obviously we don't know how the data's been used really. So I'm just thinking about if it was too similar, but there was still potential there, would we be advised in that process in relation to kind of adapting the application?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll try our best to catch that. I mean, if it's a Digital Economy Act, there will be a public log of projects using that data that you can find on the UKSA website, if the data is there that you could consult. I know that for some data sets, there is a list of research projects using Leo, for instance, in the Knowledge Hub for that data set, which you can go and consult. We do try to keep on top of, we don't see everyone that's using the data, so we can't say, you know, I think we don't want to duplicate work. We don't want to fund work twice, research twice, so we will try to rule that out and capture it, but we're not always best placed to kind of see everything that's going on. We do our best, and our panels will, you know, the experts and researchers and your colleagues will also know of other work that's going on as well, so it typically gets picked up by our panel process. So I think we'll try to advise where we can, but often I think we're trying to share more and more, put it on our website where we've got existing research funded there, but we only see often a small part of the picture as well.
Okay, Cheryl, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, thanks. I think it was just to ask whether we need to cost for data access in our applications or whether that will be provided as part of the fellowship.
So if you're using the SAIL data bank for the family court CAFCAS census linkage, there is a cost associated with using SAIL, and the SAIL team will advise you of that cost if you go through the process that's outlined in the fellowship announcement, to contact them and let them know about your project. You will meet with them and they'll advise you on the cost to build it, and then you add those into your fellowship application.
Okay.
There isn't a cost associated with ONS at the minute, so there shouldn't be an associated access cost for that data in the ONS SRS.
Okay, thanks. And sorry, just to have a follow-up question as well about the format of the application itself. To me, it just seems like a bit of a different format to what I'm used to, and that it's structured in terms of vision and approach rather than. Have you got any advice on or templates around how best to structure that so it's most useful to you?
Yes. So the new system has come in. For all intents and purposes, the vision and approach is still a 6-page PDF. So for those of you that are familiar with Case for Support, the 6-page PDF will look quite similar to your Case for Support. So if you look at the criteria we're looking at under those headings, it pretty much still looks like a Case for Support. And I would encourage you to kind of look at how you address the headings, but I think it will start to look like if you're more familiar with that. So you will be asked to upload a PDF, and for all intents and purposes, you can work offline on those with the criteria you have. The other sections should look too familiar, familiar with justification resources and things that would typically be separate applications. But the vision and approach is really trying to tease out the criteria that we typically find in the old Case for Support.
Okay, so you can put Case for Support, and then we'll be assured that the team will be able to pick out how that aligns with the vision and approach.
The panel will be given the criteria, and they'll be given the PDFs and looking at that PDF for those two criteria.
Okay, brilliant, thanks.
No worries.
Right, we have a couple more questions. The next one was from Jean Gouin.
Yeah, hi there. So I ask about the offering of fellowships after 2024. But could you clarify a little bit more about that? Because I'm hoping to apply towards the end of my postdoc. So it'd be great to know if there's any plans to offer fellowships after 2024. Thank you.
Yeah. So ADR UK as a programme is currently funded until 2026. So we only have that window with our current funding. We will be applying for further funding. As yet, that business case needs to be developed. And so we don't have any fellowships planned beyond 2024. And I can't say whether or not those would come into the next phase of the program, I guess. 2024 is our last opportunity to kind of spend our funding before our funding ends in 2026. So that's why that's scheduled in there. So nothing as yet, but it may be that it does come back in. So not a definite no, but there may be a small gap in that.
Great. And there's a question from Ben.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, I've got two questions. So just to clarify the process of moving forward. So do you have to contact SAIL separately to discuss your project and established access costs before you then go forward and submit the application?
Yes, yeah. So we would recommend you get in touch with SAIL, talk to them about your project. They will book in a meeting with you. There's a form online and contact emails addressed for SAIL. They then give you advice. They would like to hear about your project and be able to then advise on the support and costs that would be associated with that, and then build those costs into your application. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess part of that conversation could also be around the feasibility and the actual scope and things like that. And they can advise to strengthen the application.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So they have they do have researchers within SAIL that would advise you on that.
And we have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Sorry, just my second question was, am I right in thinking there's another webinar on Wednesday next week about writing a successful application? So that will that give us more on like what you're looking for and the headings and the vision and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we'll go through the criteria in that, and we're really drawing on previous successful applicants and their experiences of putting together their fellowship applications, working with data owners and navigating their kind of project setup and things like that. So some practical hints and tips in writing and preparing applications.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's okay.
And a question from Alina.
Thanks. The question is related to funding for actual cover of the time. I'm just a bit unclear, please. You mentioned the minimum 0.6. If we did submit a 0.6 FTE, will we need to make it up through the advisors? Will they get timing in it? I'm a bit unsure about whether our mentors or advisors will also be timed into it, please.
Yeah, the 0.6 recommendation is for the research fellow, the applicant themselves. Support on top of that would be in addition to that, not built into the recommended minimum, if that makes sense. We have received applications below the 0.6 and we have funded those previously, so it's not a kind of hard rule. It's just a suggestion, a recommendation from us.
Right. So if a professor, say, would be an advisor, would I be able to put some costing in there or not? Just because it's very expensive.
Yeah, you can. We do see costs built in for mentors. There'll be a role in there for you to select and when it costs. Yeah.
And then very surely people have answered already this one, but if the professor is only working without access to data, just on ideas, do they still need to be accredited?
I think they can be listed as a reviewer on your proposal, and I think they would need to be accredited for that. I think is that correct, Jenny?
Well, there are two different levels of accreditation. If you want them to actually see the raw data, they would have to be okay. If you just want to have a discussion with them, then they don't have to be an accredited researcher, but they just have to be identified on your project.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm conscious we're at time and we're over, so for those dropping off, I want to say thank you. We're happy to stay and answer more questions as we run over as well, so please do flag and pop in, but conscious people will need to run to the meetings now. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to come in. We've got lots of questions and I'll go through those and we'll add the links, the write-up of this online, as well as giving the recording as well. Please do just get in touch with your questions. Do come and chat to us. I realize this is a slightly different fellowship, but please just bring your questions and don't be afraid to come with those email addresses in the links as well. So happy to stay online if anyone wants to chat more, but otherwise thank you very much and looking forward to receiving your applications. And
I can see there was a question about registering for the How to Write a Successful Application. You can do that through Eventbrite. There's a link there.
Yes, we can circulate the link when we send the recording of this. That's next week.
And sorry, just quickly, will the slides be sent kind of immediately / today? Because I know that I've got about 100 conversations to have with various research teams ASAP. So if that's possible, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. We can circulate those.
Thank you. This has been really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks all. Thank you.
Cheryl?
Hi, sorry, just one thing occurred to me while you're on the line around, because I'm looking to put in a job share fellowship application with Amy Dillon, who I think Greg's met with before. It's just around the criteria in that when I read the guidance, it says that each fellow in and of themselves should be able to deliver the project without the other one. So really just whether you've got any suggestions on how we both illustrate our capability to deliver the whole thing, even though obviously we're going to have different relative strengths because we're different researchers.
Yeah, I think there will be different relative strengths. I think the panel won't be looking for widely, different, completely different skill sets. They'd be looking that it sort of hangs together as a coherent project, that actually if one of the fellows for whatever reason needed to step away from the project, there's maybe potential to backfill that or something. So I think the advice that we're going to give to our panel is we want our applications to be comparable. So those single fellows applying aren't disadvantaged where there's 2 applicants on a job share. So the advice will be we're looking for the job share to have similar profiles so that they can be assessed as one coherent project, if that makes sense. So it's a tricky situation for us because we want to enable the job shares, but we don't want to disadvantage. So our advice to the panel will be they should look comparable, that a single fellow alongside a job share, they should have similar skills and look like they're kind of creating a coherent project, if that makes sense.
No, that should be doable, and perhaps just then and that feeds into the risk mitigation then if one of us for whatever reason isn't available. Got it. Thank you.
No worries. All right.